maybe the game of the year. At least that's what Jaem Stewart called it. That was Oregon-Ohio State. The Ducks win 31-32 in a thriller. So we want to get the reaction now that the dust has settled. Let's hit on Jaem Stewart. Let's hit on Naim Alford. There were some big names out in Eugene.
Yeah, well, we had some great pictures from the Jaem Stewart camp from his official visit on the On3 channel. You see him on the field surrounded by Oregon fans after everyone rushed the field at Autzen Stadium following that huge win over the Buckeyes. We also saw him sitting in the throne looking like a king, draped by Dan Lanning and the Oregon coaching staff and his family, as he is a major priority for the Ducks as they want to win games like this for years to come. This is the kind of recruiting weekend, the prospects that they had on town that will put them in position to do just that. Jaem Stewart, one of the top uncommitted defensive linemen in the country, took his official visit to Oregon. And Josh, we've talked about him numerous times on the Inside Scoop and the Wiltfong Whip Around. There's a lot of people around the state of Louisiana that think that he ultimately will end up at LSU. But my intel on Jaem Stewart, talking to people in his camp, USC and Ohio State are the programs that I feel like have been in the lead for a lot of his process. But Oregon has hung around in this recruitment. He has called Dan Lanning a defensive genius. He gets to come out to Autzen Stadium, soak in that atmosphere. He says he saw everything he needed to see, from the way Tosh Lupoy runs the defense, coaches the defensive line. He had great seats where he was able to watch, observe the way that Oregon's coaches worked with the players throughout the game. It was an environment, a culture that he could see himself in. And I think coming out of this visit, Oregon has a great chance to land Jaem Stewart. Now he still has upcoming trips to USC for the Nebraska game, Ohio State for the Michigan game, and he's going to be at LSU for the Alabama game. But Oregon really set the tone for what an official visit should look like with Jaem Stewart. Him and his family and his camp had a fabulous time, and Oregon continues to be a major contender for Jaem Stewart moving forward.
Yeah, and one of the more unique situations that we've seen was Naim Alford celebrating in the Ducks locker room as a Ohio State commitment. It had to be a unique experience for Naim Alford and the Oregon coaching staff hosting one of Ohio State's top commitments. What are you hearing on Naim Alford coming out of this weekend?
Well, they had a great trip, too. This was a trip that almost didn't happen for this weekend. Oregon was looking to get him on campus for a game down the road, but with his schedule and with his brother's schedule, his brother's starting running back at Tulane, this was the weekend it had to be. So Oregon was able to pull it together, and, man, they hit big, beating the Buckeyes in front of Naim Alford and his family. They loved the environment in that stadium. His dad told me, look, these Big Ten stadiums stack up with these SEC stadiums. Oregon only sits like 65,000, but it's kind of got an old school feel. It is super loud. Everybody in there is on a mission to make the opposition uncomfortable, and the Oregon fans really rose to that occasion on Saturday night and did just that. And then Oregon, Dan Lanning and company certainly made Naim Alford and his family feel at home. His dad told me in the past that Dan Lanning is their favorite head football coach. So Coach Lanning doing a really good job of making them feel comfortable around him. And then certainly his track record of defense, what he's done at Georgia, they're very familiar with. Georgia, I thought very early in Naim Alford's recruitment was the program to beat. So certainly a lot of familiarity with Dan Lanning in Georgia in those ways. And it was a great trip. He's going to be at Ohio State for the Nebraska game in 2 weekends. He's been to a couple Auburn games. He's been to an Auburn practice. So this recruitment is still very much going to go down to the wire as he continues to dot his I's and cross his T's. Certainly still likes a lot about Ohio State. Saw a Buckeyes program that has a huge need for him to come in and play as a true freshman. But Oregon certainly hit big with Naim Alford this weekend too.
Yeah, and Naim Alford's father was just on the 5-Star Flex giving an interview to Philip Dukes, mentioned that Colorado is another program that's trying to get Naim Alford on a late official visit, so we'll see if that happens. Now, Steve, there was also a couple key flip targets on campus, and there was some rival flip targets on campus. A couple of Washington Husky commitments were in Eugene for this one. What do you make of that?
Well, Vander Plug on 300 tight end. Tight end is a major position
Yeah.
of need for Oregon if they try and push for a second straight top 5 recruiting class. And he loved the way that Oregon uses their tight end schematically under Will Stein and company. And then again, he's another that raved about the experience inside Autzen Stadium and talked about that big game feel. He'd love to play in ball games like that on the next level. And the way Oregon has been dialing it up on the recruiting trail, the first 2 years of the Dan Lanning era on the field, he knows that there's going to be a lot of big games in Oregon's future under this coaching staff. We see why Dan Lanning never even put his name in the mix for Alabama. He knows Oregon's a special place. They're competing for a national championship this year with guys like Vander Plug. They want to continue to compete for titles for years to come. And I think Oregon really moved the needle with Vander Plug. And then Zach Keski, is an offensive lineman in-state committed to Washington that they offered. Oregon's going to lose 5 of their top 7 offensive linemen following the season, so it's a big need. They're looking for guys that could even contribute early. I know they're going to hit the portal at the position, but the high school recipe is the main one for Oregon. They have several talented offensive linemen committed, and they want to build on that with Zach. And then linebacker, that's also one more position in need for the Ducks this cycle, Josh. And they had on 300 linebacker Caleb Burns from the Lone Star State on for this one. He's committed to Baylor. Oregon offered earlier in the fall. He quickly circled this past weekend as one he wanted to get to Eugene. He made it. He called it an out-of-world experience. Again, loves the defense, loves his opportunity at Oregon. I think Oregon's starting to trend with Caleb Burns following his experience at Oregon as well.
That's great intel coming out of the big game. Now, you had some more information in your Wiltfong Whip Around article that dropped on 3 on Monday morning. What's the latest on Ducks and 5-star tight end Lincoln Kier? Because I know, as you said, with Vander Plug, tight end's a major need for Oregon. So what's the latest with this 5-star?
Well, I think when he committed to Kansas State, Coach Lanning and company even turned it up more for the Goodland, Kansas 5-star. Dan Lanning's been out to Kansas to see Lincoln Kier. When they needed coaches to be on a video for a hype video for when Lincoln Kier and his team were in the basketball state playoffs, Dan Lanning was available to film himself for a minute or two to get that team pumped up. They've invested a lot of time in recruiting Lincoln Kier. Coach Drew Maringer's been a big part of that. And I'm expecting him back at Oregon for the Maryland game. He wants to get back out there one more time. He visited twice in the spring. He was out there in the summer. Oregon was the runner-up for Lincoln Kier when he picked in-state Kansas State. And I'm not saying he's going to flip. Kansas State doing all they can to keep him in the fold. They're playing well. Got a big win against Colorado on Saturday night to improve to 5-1. But Oregon has always been special to Lincoln Kier. He loves the ambiance of Eugene, the nature out there, could see himself fitting in that kind of environment and culture. And again, Oregon has only turned it up since he committed. I think he'll visit one more time, and then all bets are off on where he'll sign at that point.
All right, Oregon fans, you had your 24 hours. The celebration's over. The season's got to go on, and now it's time to talk recruiting. Get in here with me and Steve. How are we feeling about the Ducks on the recruiting trail? Jaem Stewart, Naim Alford, let us know. Comment section below.